Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the first FileMaker Academy training session. My name is Marshall Michaels. I'm the VP of Product Development with Anvil DataWorks. We're a platinum partner out of the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area. We have put these FileMaker Academy sessions together. We're going to be doing these about once a month, so we're really excited that everybody's here. To be trained on our topic today, which is creating information dashboards specifically with FileMaker. And we're going to be doing these, like I said, about once a month. And our next one, just so you maybe jot this down, is November 10th. There's going to be a FileMaker Go presentation by Mighty Data. So without further ado, a little background about what FileMaker Academy is. It's a consortium of 7 FileMaker Platinum partners. The 7 of us got together as businesses and wanted to create a way to educate the community better. We want to extend the FileMaker brand, talk a little bit more in depth on some of these sessions about what FileMaker can and can't do. And we want to provide and show that there's a really dynamic resource to the FileMaker community. In no way are we associated with FileMaker other than in our hearts and our souls and love of the product. But we're committed to putting this together. So today we're going to be reviewing this little class syllabus, why dashboards, some management thoughts, where does a dashboard fit in your FileMaker solution, some design considerations. Then we're going to bring Samir, one of our certified developers, to do a demonstration, and then we're going to take care of some questions. Now, why dashboards? Basically, dashboards have been a life-changing event with us here at Anvil. We're very excited about the use of dashboards. We have in our system dashboards in pretty much every system, and we've boiled it down to basically 2 tenets. The first is you can't manage what you can't measure. And that is, if you can't put a number around a business goal, if you can't define what you want your sales to be or what you want your productivity to be or what you want your billable percentage to be, if you can't measure your goal, you're never going to be able to manage it. The other tenet is what gets watched gets done, meaning if you're employees, if you're a manager and you have people working for you, if you're a business owner and you have employees working for you, whatever you tend to put on that dashboard, that tends to trickle down into what employees will work on. I know from my own experience that when we started putting our dashboards together with our FileMaker system about 6 years ago, I got this incredible feeling of control and relief over the whole company, knowing that the different aspects of our company that I wanted to monitor were right there in front of me, and I could make decisions right away. And work out strategy and make changes. So the use of the dashboards, there's several management uses that you can use. You can use them to manage, analyze, and monitor. Basically managing people, making sure that they're doing the right things that you want them to do. And again, the way to get them to achieve the company goals is put what statistics you want on the dashboard. They'll work toward those statistics. You can do analyze of the data. You can do analysis of the data that's underneath of the FileMaker system, and that will help you look into the future and determine, are you meeting goals? Are you on track or are you off track? And then you can monitor the progress of those goals. If you use dashboards properly, we've seen in our practice that a lot of times people ask us to do reports, and we'll print out these exhaustive reports to get sub-summaries, and all they want to do is print it out so that they can see the bottom right-hand corner, some number down there. So basically what we've seen with dashboards is there's fewer reports. If you want that number, put it up on a dashboard, and away you go. The great thing about FileMaker is that when somebody makes a change and they commit that record, everything updates across the dashboard. So you're going to see things in real time and have instant access to that data to be able to make those decisions. The other kind of interesting thing that happens is if you have a monitor and if you do it right and you set up your computer and you put the dashboard on a monitor that's separate from your working monitor and you never touch that monitor, you just use it to view the dashboard on a daily basis, you'll start to memorize trends. You'll start to know how many calls somebody should be making. You'll start to memorize what your revenues are for a particular month. You'll start to memorize production numbers that you may put on there. And then when these numbers start to change a little bit, you'll be able to instantly make changes to ward off any problems that you might have later in the month, later in the quarter, later in the year. By matching up the business goals to a specific number, you can now become very objective in your management style. You see the numbers, you see how they're working, you see the percentages, and you understand that there's really no subjectiveness in your business equation anymore. You're talking to your employees, they're either hitting the numbers or they're not hitting the numbers. Now, if they're not hitting the numbers, it's a great opportunity for you to educate them or change the process in order to help them out. You can also have, because everything is in real time, you've got quicker reaction to issues, and it's a much more efficient use of resources. You don't really have anybody putting reports together for you. I know that a lot of people, even though they're using FileMaker or they're using other systems. So where does a dashboard fit? If you are working with a FileMaker database, typically, the great thing that we all know about FileMaker is that it maps to the business process extremely well because it's such a flexible system to be able to develop in. Once you create your business to process, or once you define what that is by charting it out, there are going to become different places in that business process where you want certain numbers. If you are filling test tubes and you want to know how many test tubes you filled that hour, that week, that month, you're going to have a place in that business process where you're going to realize that a report could come out of there and it would be real nice to have that. So the business process starts the whole thing. You have to have that kind of mapped out. Then the next thing is the system structure, your ERDs, to define the fields and the structure of the system. That leads into the data entity. That's one record of data, one test tube, what's in it, where's it stored, things like that. Then that builds onto lists of data, and that's typically where FileMaker systems stop, where you have lists of data or sub-summaries, or you can see all the contacts in a company or things like that. The dashboard is part of the interface, but it's the next level up of those lists of data. You may want to know, for instance, all the people in California. Well, if you stop at the list of data, you have the list of everybody that's in California, and you might do a sub-summary to count that. But if you put on a dashboard California and a number behind it, you're kind of reaching down into that list of data. You're accumulating the data entity, and you're pulling that into the dashboard so that you can easily see how it works. If you haven't reached that step, definitely contact one of your FileMaker Academy developers that's local to you and start talking about it. Talk about what numbers you use to drive your company so that they can start working on the structure, they can start working on the data entities to then provide you that data so that you can take full advantage of the dashboard. The great thing is, the dashboard is just a layout. It's just a layout in FileMaker. There's really not a ton of magic to it. It's complex from the standpoint of creating the structure and the business process. But once you create that layout, it's just as easy to add things to that dashboard as it was to make FileMaker map out to that business process in the first place. So that's kind of where a dashboard fits. Kind of a housekeeping as I'm about to turn this over to Samir so that he can do the demo. But if you have a question for either me or Samir, go ahead and type it in your console. Depending upon how much time we have left at the end, we're going to try to answer as many questions as we can. If you don't get your question answered, please submit your question to Maria at anvildataworks.com. That's mlopez@anvildataworks.com. And we're going to show you at the end the list of the FileMaker Academy members and their home cities so that you can certainly find somebody close to you to work with. So without further ado, I'd like to bring on Samir Khan. He is a certified developer. He's been certified in 8, 9, 10, 11 He's worked with FileMaker for probably 12 years, doing support in some capacity, doing development probably for 6. He's one of the best trainers that we have. He's an authorized trainer, which means that FileMaker has certified him as a trainer. And without further ado, I'd like to bring Samir on and have him go over his part of the presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. And let's talk about some dashboard concepts. How do we build them and make them work? And one of the questions that came in earlier was defining a dashboard. What is a dashboard? First off, let's talk about the agenda, what we're going to look at, familiar examples of dashboards. What are widgets and the good and the bad? A little bit of housekeeping, just talking about some things that we'll need to do in FileMaker. And then, of course, at the end, the demo of how to put it all together. And so some familiar dashboards, we've seen them in our operating systems. Right? On the left-hand side here, we've got the Big Daddy. This is the Mac dashboard. And the dashboard, what it really is doing for us is giving us an overview of information, looking at particulars, if need be, drilling down into the data. But generally speaking, looking at information as an overview, looking at trends, looking at marketing information if we're dealing with a little more specific examples. Okay, this is the Mac dashboard, and then on the right-hand side here is our Windows dashboard. Okay, and each one of these items here are known as widgets. Now the widgets, taking a look at some examples here. Okay, good, bad, okay, and excellent. So talk about why these widgets are good. The dashboard is just a collection of these widgets, giving us various different pieces of information. So let's talk about why these are good, bad, and okay, or excellent. The first one is good, because the reason it's good is because it gives us details. This is the advertising's sales, and they're pretty close to 5 million. The sales force itself is a little above 5 million, and then we have a grand total which gives us roughly close to 5 million. So you can see that the information shown is detailed enough, but also broad enough that we can look at the data and see trends of information without having to drill down too far. The second item here, this bad widget, the reason it's bad is because we have no information. What does the 2 million represent? What does the 5 million represent? What is the arrow pointing to? What does that mean? It doesn't give us any info. So this widget, although it may look kind of nifty, really doesn't give us anything important, anything we can work with. Okay. The OK chart, now this is a pretty good chart, shows us percentages of sales, perhaps, or something along those lines. But it doesn't give us any total information. So I don't really know what the 52% represents. Is that 52% of 10,000, 100,000, etc.? Okay, so it's okay. It's showing us some info, but nothing really great. The bottom example here is an excellent widget, and the reason is it gives us information, gives us a visual representation of that. It displays that information, right? And it's concise. It gives us multiple values, multiple sections to report on. So moving along, and let me just pop back, and one other thing I want to say with this, the nice beauty of this information is it is a list of information with the graphs, multiple graphs. So moving along, some of the basics, the housekeeping that we have to worry about here. Data normalization, we'll talk about this, what exactly this means. Relational design. How does that work in FileMaker? Another question that had come in earlier before the webinar had started, are we going to be using any information from, his name is Edward Tuft, and his recommendations for dashboarding. One piece that we will integrate is the KPI, or key performance indicators. And then finally, the tools in FileMaker. How do we put this all together? Take a look at the data normalization here. some examples of this, and these are really simple. But why do we normalize data? The reason we want to make sure that our information is sound, that it follows certain rules, is because with dashboarding, we're going to be dealing with a lot of aggregate mathematics, and so therefore, especially in dashboarding, aggregate math is the core of the values that we're trying to gather. So the data should be in a good form. Things like containing one value. Whoops, I can't click. One value per field. Okay. Trying not to duplicate data across multiple tables. If we look at this example here, the first one represents contact information. Well, that contact information, if we have multiple phones, we should probably move that into a secondary field. Phone 1, phone 2, cell phone, work phone. Second example here, this is a customer table. This is an invoice table. So kind of a rule of thumb here, whatever your primary key is, if I'm looking at customers, for example, the primary key in customers, for the table customers, is the customer ID. So therefore, the table should only contain customer-related information. So therefore, if we get into a situation of the invoice, we shouldn't be storing or duplicating the phone number into that invoice table. So just following some rules here for normalized data. I won't go in depth here with the understanding of relational designs, but one thing that we want to keep, just if we're going to be developing, keep in mind, is that the concept of table occurrences. Okay, if I've got a dashboard table, I'm going to be using table occurrences to gather the information that I need. I may even, in some cases, build other additional tables to perform calculations for me, do that aggregate mathematics. In our example today, key performance indicators, we're going to be using some basic stuff, but the idea of a key performance indicator is that it gives us automatic updates to the real-time data. Instantaneously, we know if something is good or bad by the color that's denoted. And we use some standards of life to represent the data trends. Red is bad, it's no good, something is wrong. Okay, green, we see green and we know it's go. Looking good. And then we're going to use a blue. You may want to use yellow. It depends on what you're doing. But blue for neutral. It's not good, it's not bad, but there's something going on with this value or with this set of data. There are some tools in FileMaker that we're going to need in order to create the dashboarding process, right? Getting all these widgets together, building the widgets, and putting them all on one screen. Global fields. For the developers, I don't need to explain why global fields are so important, but from a basic standpoint, we're going to be using these for the user interface and to create the dynamics of the dashboard. Relational concepts. A lot of times when we talk about relationships, if anyone's attended an intro, intermediate, advanced class, FileMaker, we know that relational design, a lot of times we just use this standard equals sign. One value on this side is equal to another value on the other side. Okay. But in this dashboarding concept, we have to step out of that. We have to step out of that and start using comparative operators, things like less than and greater than, not equal to, and as we'll see in one of these examples, the rarely used Cartesian operator. Okay. Understanding elements of the charting engine, we need to know how this works, and we'll explain it as we go along. The charting engine actually has a nice little hidden feature I think a lot of people overlook. And of course, because of the concepts that we're putting together, mathematics, we're going to be doing a lot of calculation. So how do we put it all together? I'm going to go ahead and close out the presentation here, and let's pop open our FileMaker database. So for example, we're going to be working with the Tetragrammaton invoicing system. And we're looking at a dashboard right now. This is our overview of invoicing. Some basics here, if we're going to be dealing with invoicing, let's just understand that the basic database design of this system here. We've got customers, we have invoices. Those invoices will have line items which represent the product that we're buying, the quantity, and that subtotal price for the item. Pretty standard invoicing system. Some things that we will be tracking, cost versus revenue. How much does the product cost us, and then how much are we invoicing for? And then, of course, the profits that are associated with that. Okay. If you're familiar with invoicing, most of us are, there are going to be reports that we run, monthly reports, quarterly reports, annual reports. We are interested in particulars, unpaid, late payments, total grossing, clients, those kinds of things. So in order to build this system, you can see we've got a good amount of info here. I can look at for the month or for the current year, the month of January here, I did 457 in revenue. The cost was 343. So my profit is 114, 459. Now you notice I'm using some key performance indication in this list of values. I kept it simple. We're just going to be assigning color codes to text. So green is good, right? Green is good. Blue, I know I've got something going on. That's probably because I've got some past due information. The past due is red. Okay. So some key performance indicators just throughout the system here, denoting good and bad and some neutral information. Now the first point that we want to bring up with this, if I'm looking at invoices, I'm doing things by month or doing things by quarter, even by annual charting. I want to build a particular process. Now if you notice here, I've got a list of months. Okay, it's not a list of invoices, it's not a list of years, this is a list of months. The way that we're familiar with this in FileMaker, we look at it in layout mode. We know that portals give us lists of records. There's no way around that. We can filter out certain things, but the fact is that this lists all the records for this particular relationship. In this case, I'm pointing to a list of all of the months. I'm going to open up my managed database. This is how we modify the system, add structure, field structure, table structure, and then the relational models. Let's talk about the tables that we have in here. The first one that's kind of unique, if you look at the details there, the dashboard table. So this layout that we're looking at, which has all these fancy widgets, this is the dashboard table. The dashboard table only has one record in it, and you'll see why we need that one record, and 36 fields. Okay? But it only shows up once in the relational graph. I've also got a months table. Okay? And the months table shows up a few times in the graph. You're going to see why, but the months table is important in order for me to generate a lot of the information that's being displayed on the dashboard. Just real quickly, we'll just take a look at these two. If we go to fields here and look at, we'll start with the dashboard. The dashboard contains calculations in global fields. That's it. There are no standard data entry fields here. We use these global fields. These are what you could consider temporary storage fields. We use them a lot for user interface. And a lot of calculations. And there's stuff that's going on in here, which we'll explain as we get to it. In order for me to process information by month, I've created a months table. And as you can see, this table is filled with calculations. The only standard entry field is a month number field. And this is an auto enter field. All it's really doing is just taking a number 1 through 12. So if we look at the months table in this list, it only has 12 records in it. It has a record for every month. And what we've done is created calculations to define the starting and the end points of the month. This is the start date of January. This is the end date of January. Okay, so it's pretty standard stuff. It's all based off of a global start date, January 1, 2011. So basically, I'm building all these calculations off of a standard field that gives me a date. So that date, I want you to go ahead and define the month spread here. I'll open this managed database, and we look at months. Some of the stuff that we're required to do, if I'm defining months here as records, I need a start date and an end date for the month. You can build these any way you want. Custom functions, case functions, piecing it together, individually and just kind of tweaking it a little bit. I've kept mine pretty simple. The one thing that I have done in here is put in the current year, start and end dates, and then a previous year, start and end date. The beauty of this is that this table then, these 24 fields, they will be calculating out current year and previous year information for months. And it's only one record that will be doing that. Okay. In this scenario, I don't need a record for every month that data is being tracked in the system. So I'm not going to end up with 36 records for 3 years. I only have 12 records, and it represents only 2 sets of yearly information. If I wanted a third, it come in and it just kind of duplicates this information and build out my third month reporting. The idea is, though, that because these are global calculations, and I don't want to get too much into this because there's a lot of programming, because these are global calculations, whatever my start date is, generates the start and end dates per month for the current and previous year. So in a way that this dashboarding system will allow me to create my own starting point and then report on that information. Okay. Oops. So I've got my first set of information defined. It's a months table, and it does all these cool calculations and gives me the total revenue and the total cost. How is it going through and doing that? This is where we get into the relational design, and we start talking about those operators. Okay, my first set, invoices per month and invoices per month previous year. So as you can see, I've got some things going on in this relational diagram. I've got my dashboard occurrences, and then I've got another set of occurrences. These are the months calculatory information. Okay, what are the total invoices per month? What about last year? Are there any invoices that are unpaid? And we'll look at all of these. But this is where those operators are going to start coming into play. If I'm looking at invoices per month, and I know that my months table contains 1 record per month, and I've got these 2 calculations, start date and end date, then what I'm going to do is just tell FileMaker that for the current month, show me all the invoices where the invoice date falls in between those 2 dates. Is it, right, so the start date is less than the invoice date, less than or equal to. End date end is greater than or equal to. Okay, so filter all of the invoices. I've got 10,000 invoices, but this relationship only shows me the January 2011 invoices. So here are all the invoices for that month. Invoices per month. Previous year, right? We use those secondary sets of date calculations to filter out the invoices. Okay. The months table then will have the calculations to define how much what was the total of all the invoices for the month? Okay, and here's where we're getting into some of that aggregate mathematics, right? So take the sum of all the invoices per month total. Simple enough. Okay. I can also do that for the previous year. See, previous year, invoice total. Just take the sum of that invoices per month, previous year. So I've got these guys per month. I've got this information as far as the global dynamic relationships. What year is currently selected, giving me the sum of those invoices. And of course the year before. If we discard that and we take a look at the list here, then the total cost, obviously then I'll have a calculation for the, total revenue, and then I'll have a calculation for the total cost. Then the math is just there to define the profit, right? Revenue minus cost. Here's the profit. What's the past due? Well, we defined past due. And I'm just talking about relational work here. If I'm looking at the months table, what's unpaid? Okay. Here's where we'll start talking about the use of global fields and also of constant values. If we take a look at the months table, I need to find all the invoices for the month that their status is unpaid. We go to the months table. This is where we start getting into the use of constant fields. Constant fields allow me to define a particular filter for the relationship. So if I look at this one particular constant unpaid, for example, it's a calculation that defines as the word unpaid. So if we're looking at a filter process, we're saying that all the invoices unpaid within this date range, the relationship is defined as the start and end, right? The same thing as all the invoices per month, except now that I'm saying this constant field is equal to the status of the invoice. Okay. Then I just need to write my calculation for unpaid. Just give me the sum of the invoices unpaid. And then I sum that up in my list here. Simple enough. I know it's just a list of records, but this will translate into all of my other widgets. So if I take a look at my profits by month, okay, January 2010 versus 2011, what are the profit differences? You can see that very quickly that I'm definitely making more money. Now, some months not so great, but it is more than the previous year's same month value. Okay, so taking a look at how this was built, if you're familiar with the charting system, we know that there are 3 different ways of pulling the data for charting. We can take the current found set, we can take related records, or we could use this nifty, what I consider a hidden, unmentioned feature of FileMaker's charting engine, the delimited data. Delimited data allows me to define my own sets of information to chart. So in this first horizontal axis, right, what's down here below, what are the labels? I just defined a calculation. Now, these are delimited values, right, delimited data. So I have to set a delimiter between each value. And in this case, it's going to be a character return. Okay, so I give my spread of the months, and then I tell it what 2 categories, what are the vertical axis representing, right, these 2 columns, what do they represent? Well, they're going to be the current year's profit and the previous year's profit, profit fields. I mean, just writing some calculations, I knew what the profit was, revenue minus cost. So now I've got this calculation for profit that's going to be listed. I'm using this list function. Right? They're going to be listed. There are my delimited sets. And then the chart itself will just go through and build that for every month. Go ahead and give me the spread of total revenue, total profits. Obviously, since we haven't put anything in for October through December, for this year, we don't have columns for them. Okay, so this is live data. This is up to date. If I were to go in and mark invoices in July 2011 as paid, the past due number is going to change. And it's going to change immediately on the screen. Okay, this is the benefit of the dashboard. Automatic updates, automatic reporting. There's no just as Marshall was mentioning, I don't have to run the report, that 20-page report, just to get the number in the lower right-hand corner. That number is here. I just have to hover over the column. Okay. So that's how this profits by month widget or chart is going to work. We're using these nifty little feature of delimited data. Let's take a look at the late payments for 2010 and for 2011, how we can put this together here. Late payments are obviously a concern in invoicing. They paid it, but they paid it late. Okay, and so we had to wait for the money. How do we build this concept? Just a quick overview. I go into my invoices table. I've got to do it at this level. I have to go to the invoices table and I have to modify this table because I need to check the logic here of the date paid versus the due date. And I need to know, obviously here, I've got a flag late. I need to know if the date paid was greater than the due date. That marks this as a late invoice, a late paid invoice. Simple enough. I use this calculation. It just says if this is greater than the value of this field is 1. And then using my, you already know this, right, months, using a constant, I can filter for all of the late, the 1 records. So I come here to this invoices paid late. It's my filter for the dates, and there's my constant late. And then, of course, for the previous year as well, same thing. Looking at the mathematics here, all we're really doing is taking a count, right, another type of aggregate math. Just count up the records. How many were late versus how many were paid on time. And looking at this, I can see the trends. 2010, there were a lot of late payments, 40%. Although in 2011, it's only 13%, so there's a major difference. Even the values themselves, 133 versus 410, that's a huge difference. So looking at a couple of other widgets here, we've got our revenue by market. As we process invoices, we'll mark what market that we're selling to. So we've got our 4 markets here: admin, IT, personal, and other. All right. Looking at this, I can see the trends. Admin, we're actually down this year a little bit. Not a little bit, actually a good amount, about halfway. So maybe marketing or products that I'm selling in the admin category, just not fitting the bill. People aren't interested. IT, on the other hand, has shot up. Okay. Last year we were at 166, sorry, 1.667, yeah, so 1.6 million, and this year we're already over 2 million. 2,008,000. Okay. Personnel and other, also we can see the trends there. So how was this built in the system? Okay. This one was done a little bit differently. Instead of going through the months, because I'm not too interested in the monthly span of this. This is more of the annual information. I've created the same process that I used in months, except that I did it directly to the dashboard table. Okay, so now we're defining the set. The months are specific to monthly information. The dashboard, I'm more concerned with the annual information of this. So I had to build that same process. What's the start and end date? Just built 2 fields in dashboard for it. And then same concept of the constant here. A constant calculation that says IT, and it's equal to the market. And then taking sums of those values. So we use fields here. taking the sum. Oh, these are the completes. My apologies. So for these particulars, I did it a different way, and I actually did it on purpose. So you noticed a lot of this stuff we've done through calculations in a table. And so for these particulars, the charting that we did here, this particular chart, if we pop in the layout mode. Instead of creating fields for this information, I did it through the calculation engine. So give me the sum of that invoice admin total. And it's the same thing. The reason why we did this was to illustrate that it doesn't matter. You could write the calculations for it and put them into the table structure of the dashboard, or you can come into the charting engine and write the same mathematics. And it's the same thing. You notice that the only thing that's really required is the relationship. How do I get that information? And that's going to be the key for a lot of these widgets. How do I get to that information? We just have to figure that out. Same concept, of course, is using delimited data. I can build my own lists. Okay, so I've got my revenue by market. It gives me the spread here. I can also use that same spread of relationships to define the comparison of information. And you notice here, I've got the comparison of total revenue broken down by market. So again, trends. I'm looking at data trends here, marketing and otherwise. How much of the sales was personal, IT, other, and admin? And then looking at that in the current year, you can see that I've actually increased a little bit. Total revenue has increased, but also these categories. So even though I'm down a little bit in particular categories, the market spread is actually a little more even. So maybe I'm not doing anything wrong. Maybe it's just a matter of the numbers kind of misleading me or the observer a little bit. So looking at the pie charts, it actually looks pretty good. It's a pretty even spread. IT has decreased a little bit, but not that much as far as the spread of money. Last little bit here, talking about customer data. I've got two lists, the top 12 unpaid and the top 12 grossing customers. And that's good information for me is the top of the ladder guy, right? I'm looking down at everything. I want to know who are the top problematic customers, quote unquote problematic, and then who are the top 12 grossing customers. These are invoices that are out, that either have been paid for or unpaid for. Actually, I'm sorry, this is total paid. So looking at this list, I can see that my biggest problematic customer, right, quote unquote, is Stephen King here, Dark Tower Records. He owes me 12 grand, and that's a good amount of money. It's a good amount of money. So do I call him up? Do I email him? I could build in some drill downs here at this point, take a look at the unpaid invoices if I wanted to, maybe find out what's going on with them. Maybe we didn't fulfill all of it. I could have also built that into this dashboard. But understanding that this list can potentially conflict with this list, because if you look at the second person here, second company, Callahan Exterminators. Now Donald owes me close to $12,000, but for the year, this man has dropped almost $240,000 into the company, total invoice. So he might not be actually at the top of my list. You know what, maybe it's just the last invoice or the last two invoices, but he's been pretty good this year. So maybe I'm not going to bug him. And we've got a couple in there. We look at Dean and Deshane. Susanna owes us $7,400, but she's also on the top of our list. 202, not bad. Apple as well, Apple Incorporated, Steve Jobs. I may not give him a call. $7,600, right? That's not too much, considering how much he's actually paid for the year. But there are a couple on here that don't show up over here. Right? Feldman Oracles, the price is right. Bob Barker owes us $10,000, and he's not at the top of my list. So I might be giving him a call or shooting him an email or talking to the collections guys and saying, hey, you know what? Let's call up Bob and find out where our money is. So just this last chart that I'm looking at, we already know how it's built, but we can look at the specifics here. The unpaid versus completed invoices for the year. Pretty good, actually. Even though unpaid, I've got a current amount of 181 out. I've got 3 million in, and there's only 5.6%. So doing pretty good, actually. I think looking at this as an overview, the company's doing well. Some of the information's a little flat. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just means we don't have any spikes. We do pretty steady income and pretty steady work. So I don't have to worry too much about the spikes as far as the quarterly revenue is concerned. And even in a yearly standpoint, annual standpoint, I'm doing good. I've got increases every month of total invoices. So we're doing pretty good. I was going to take those last few minutes and build an object here, but we actually are out of time. So just to wrap this up, understand that there's a lot that goes into defining the dashboard. We really have to sit down with people crunching the numbers, people that are running those reports, finding out what information they actually need. They run this 20-page report, but they only pull 5 fields off of that report, and they stick it into an Excel spreadsheet, or they type it up in their Word document. So getting away from the printed reports and defining it on the dashboard, we just need to know where is the data, what criteria are you using to define that value, and then we define it in FileMaker. And we use all the tools that we just showed, global fields and calculations and relationships, and then finally putting these little widgets together to display the information. So with that, I'm going to pass the buck back over to Marshall here, and I think we've got a couple minutes for questions. And I'll let them decide on that. Marshall, are you still there?
Yeah, I sure am. Thanks, Samir. That was a great presentation. We have about 10 minutes left. And what I'd like to do is, Maria, can you just put up the last slide that shows the FileMaker Academy and the members? One slide before that. Okay. So basically the way the FileMaker Academy works is wherever you are, just kind of take a peek at the different cities. We are very like-minded companies and are really ready to work with you. So we've got a lot of the United States covered. If you don't see a city or you don't really want to deal with trying to hunt and peck as to who you should deal with, again, just send an email to Maria at anvildataworks.com. That's mlopez at anvildataworks.com, and she will be able to direct you to the right person. A lot of people are asking if the file will be made available for download. Samir, what do you think? Is that something that we can work out?
I think so. Usually with these types of things, we'll write up a blog and throw the example file and the details.
Okay, perfect. So what we're going to do is if you go to anvildataworks.com, go to our blog section and check out our blog. Samir has indicated that he will be writing a blog about this, and he will put it on, he'll put the sample file with the blog. That way you can kind of get a taste of what we are all about, as well as look at some of our other blogs. We're also going to put the file up on the FileMaker Academy blog, and you can get to that by going to FileMakerAcademy.com, and you'll be able to download it from there as well. So that takes care of, I'm trying to chunk these questions and see if I can answer a lot of them at the same time. It seems like a lot of you are looking for the sample. A lot of you are looking for the kind of the ER diagram behind. Somebody asked what happens if it doesn't start in January. You can adjust the start date of any, if you've got a federal calendar, from October to September, or actually if you happen to be Apple, they're on the same calendar. You can make some changes inside the calculations that will very quickly move everything to your year. What else do we have? Are Spark lines available in FileMaker? At this point, I don't think they are. Samir, do you know of anybody who's providing graphics for the Spark lines?
No, I haven't actually seen anything.
Okay.
I can't say for sure.
I got a question. How difficult is it to incorporate drill down? Each of the graphical elements, each of the widgets that are on top of that dashboard can actually be a button. So when you click on the button, it can do a search, and it can then take you to that list layout that I was talking about. So again, I imagine 90% of the FileMaker databases that are out there stop at that list level. So you probably already have these layouts built. You just need to add that dashboard on top of that. So it's very easy to go down. What else do we got? We talked about.
Yeah, I saw that.
Do you see anything in here that's kind of jumping out at you, Samir?
Yeah, there was one that, can you transfer individual charts to different sign-ins in computers? What we would do is probably define multiple dashboards or create some sort of filtering process so that different sign-ins would go to different dashboards. And then we would just write that into some sort of menu or login script to say, admin sees this dashboard, whereas, IT sees their dashboard, and so forth and so on.
Okay. I just got back from one of our developers. Just hit me with a chat that says that there's a chart for Spark lines. Samir, Warren knows about that, so why don't you grab that and throw some information about that on the blog. Throw it up on Anvil when you actually do the blog. The other thing, it's kind of a question that I have, Samir. How much of this translates into the iPad?
All of this would be fine. It would work in the iPad. There are some concerns if you're going to be doing 3G, and we're going to address that in Anvil's next webinar.
Okay, great.
User group. As far as warehousing the data, right now we are pulling calculated values, but if we're going to be doing some iPad or let's say wide area network access, one thing that we could do is take all these numbers and warehouse them, put them into storage somewhere, and then with that storage, it's displayed very quickly. There is no calculation involved. The calculations are done on the back end, perhaps with the server-side scripting, or otherwise, where the data is stored. There's no unstored process with any of it. It's done through calculations, and it makes for the speed of the dashboard, the efficiency of it, much faster, and then access through wide area network and then even through iPad and iPhone applications.
Okay, perfect.
And we'll be talking about that in an upcoming webinar.
Okay. Well, I think that is going to wrap it up. Again, if you do have questions, please send them to mlopez@anvildataworks.com. Questions about which of the 7 FileMaker Academy groups that you can work with, which of the questions that might have been answered or not answered. And then let's talk a little bit about the next semester's class that's coming up on Thursday, November 10th. That's actually going to be 11 a.m. It says CST there. I do believe it's going to be Eastern Standard, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard. So we will be sending out invites. You'll get the webinar. You'll get everything just like you did this time. If you go to FileMakerAcademy.com and just kind of bookmark that and check on it, once a week, once every other week, you'll see some of the events that we have cooking. We're basically going to rotate through the different companies, so you'll get a taste of each company as they do the presentation. But the next one is going to be 5 important techniques to building a solution in FileMaker Go. FileMaker Go is a product that lives on the iPad as well as the iPhone. And I have to tell you, as a user of iPad, as FileMaker Go, I'm shocked at the speed. I think it is an amazing product. You hear the overused term game changer, but it really lets you take your data on the go, no pun intended, or actually maybe the pun was intended. But it's going to be presented by Mighty Data. They're out of the Texas region. We're proud that they're partners of us. They're proud that we're partners of them. And again, it's going to be Thursday, November 10th. And to register, you can just go to FileMakerAcademy.com. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here with us. Please keep checking back with the FileMaker Academy. We're gonna be trying to make it your central FileMaker learning area. Thanks so much.